The pack buried the blind pup alive. The Omega dug him out and starved in his place. The moon hung low in the sky, casting silver light over the twisted trees of the forest. Shadows stretched like fingers across the ground, hiding secrets that the day never dared to see. Deep in the heart of the pack's territory, a small shape struggled against the cold soil. Kale, a blind pup no older than a season, yelped weakly, his tiny body buried by the hands of the pack's alpha. They had deemed him unworthy, a blemish on the strength of their lineage. His soft fur was matted with dirt, his breathing shallow and fearful. He could not see the faces around him, but he could feel the cruelty in the air, sharp and biting. The pack members who had participated in the act turned away, their eyes a mixture of obedience and guilt. No one dared to defy the alpha, not openly. Not until Lyra stepped forward. Lyra, the Omega of the pack, was known for her gentle nature, a quiet heart in a world of claws and dominance. She had watched from the shadows, her stomach twisting with anger and sorrow. Her heart ached at the sight of the pup, buried alive simply for being different. Without a word, she sank to the ground and began to dig, her hands clawing through the cold earth. The soil was heavy, clinging to her fingers like it wanted to hold the pup's fate in place. She ignored the warning growls in her mind, ignored the fear that gripped her chest. Kale's life mattered more than any pack law. Finally, after what felt like hours, though it could only have been minutes, her fingers brushed against something small and warm. She pulled with all her strength, and Kale tumbled into her arms, coughing and trembling. "You're safe now," Lyra whispered, pressing her palm to his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. Kale shivered, not just from the cold, but from the shock of being alive. She carried him to a hollow beneath a twisted oak, a place no pack member would dare enter. There she wrapped him in a thin cloth and fed him from her own rations, her body aching as hunger gnawed at her. She refused to eat, insisting that Kale's life came first. Kale's head rested against her chest, his ears twitching at the faint sounds of the forest. Though he could not see, he sensed her presence like a light in the dark, a warmth that promised safety. He had never known kindness, only fear and abandonment. And yet, here was someone who risked everything for him. The days passed slowly. Lyra tended to Kale with a devotion that astonished even herself. She scavenged food from the forest, drank from the streams, and kept watch at night. She told him stories of the world beyond the pack's territory, of forests that sang with wind, rivers that shimmered like liquid silver, and stars that watched over all creatures. Kale listened, his small body growing stronger with each day. Though his eyes could not see, he felt the pulse of life around him, the heartbeat of the forest, and the steadfast presence of Lyra. And in that presence, something stirred within him. A spark of hope, fragile but undeniable. But not all eyes were blind to their secret. Rumors of the missing pup and the Omega's defiance began to whisper through the pack like a rising wind. Some were curious, some jealous, but all wary. Breaking the Alpha's law was dangerous, punishable by exile, or worse. Kale's body grew, and with it a strange energy. He would sit by the hollow's entrance, ears lifted, sensing movements beyond the trees. Sometimes he would shiver, not from cold, but from visions that flickered through his mind. Faces of creatures long gone, whispers of events he could not understand, and a strange light that seemed to call to him. Lyra noticed the change but did not speak of it. The forest itself seemed aware of Kale, the air tense with something ancient, something that had lain dormant until now. She could see it in the way the shadows moved differently around him, and in the way the wind seemed to carry messages only he could hear. Despite the dangers, a bond deepened between them. Lyra found herself speaking to him not just to teach or comfort, but because the sound of her own voice reminded her that she was still alive, still capable of hope. And Kale in turn responded, not with words, for he could not speak much yet, but with trust, with gestures, with the soft nuzzle of his head against her hand. The first time Kale truly showed his strength was during a storm. The wind howled like a chorus of lost souls, the rain lashing against the hollow with unrelenting fury. Lyra struggled to hold a makeshift shelter in place, while Kale whimpered softly, frightened by the chaos of nature. Then, without warning, Kale stood. His small frame radiated something unfamiliar, something commanding, though he was still a pup. He moved to the entrance, sensing the storm with a clarity that defied his blindness. Lightning struck nearby, and Kale flinched, but he did not retreat. Instead, he lifted his head and howled, a pure, resonant sound that echoed through the trees, defying the storm. Lyra's breath caught. The howl carried a power that she could feel in her chest, a pulse that resonated with the forest itself. It was as if the forest recognized him, acknowledged him, and perhaps even revered him. You have a gift," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling with awe. "You're more than you know." Kale turned his head toward her, as if understanding every word, and pressed against her shoulder. In that moment neither of them spoke, but the unspoken bond was electric, a connection forged in danger and compassion. Yet danger was never far. One evening while Lyra was gathering herbs, she sensed movement beyond the trees. A pair of eyes, sharp and calculating, watching. The Alpha. He had discovered her defiance. Lyra froze, her body rigid with fear. She could not outrun him, not in open space, and Kale was still too young to confront the pack openly. She gathered the pup in her arms and ran deeper into the forest, following paths she had long known but rarely used. The Alpha's growl followed them, distant but menacing. The forest seemed to conspire with her, branches bending to block sight lines, roots tangling to slow pursuit. Yet she knew this was only temporary. The Alpha's determination was legendary. He would not give up easily. As they reached a clearing by a small stream, Lyra set Kalain down. He sensed her fear, pressing close, his small body trembling, but his eyes glowed faintly, reflecting the moonlight in a way that seemed unnatural. The visions returned, fleeting and sharp. Glimpses of the Alpha approaching, the pack circling, and something darker still, whispering from beyond the shadows. "You're not just a pup," Lyra said softly, brushing dirt from his fur. "You're something more. And if we survive, you'll need to understand what that means." Kale whimpered softly but did not resist. In his small chest, his heartbeat was strong, a rhythm that promised life, defiance, and perhaps even destiny. Hours later, they settled in a hidden hollow beneath a ridge. Lyra had gathered food, but she did not eat. Her strength was waning, her body starved and exhausted. Kale nuzzled her hand, sensing the sacrifice, and pressed his head against her shoulder. "Don't worry," she whispered. "As long as I breathe, you will not be harmed. I will protect you." The moon rose higher, bathing the forest in silver, and Kale closed his eyes, though he could not see. He felt the pulse of the earth beneath him, the flow of life around him, and the heartbeat of the Omega who had chosen him over her own safety. He understood somehow that her courage was more powerful than any claw or fang, and that her loyalty was a shield stronger than any magic he could imagine. And then, in the quiet, just before dawn, something stirred within him, a warmth, a light, a presence that had been sleeping deep inside since the moment he had been buried alive. His tiny body shivered, and for the first time his eyes glowed, not in fear, not in confusion, but with something unnatural. Lyra noticed it immediately, her breath catching in her throat. "Kale, what is it?" she asked, fear and awe mingling in her voice. Kale tilted his head toward her as if to answer, but no sound came. Instead, the glow faded slowly, leaving only the silver sheen of moonlight on his fur, and a silent promise that the world they knew had changed forever. The pack may have thought him weak. They may have thought that burying him would erase his existence. But the forest, the moon, and the bond he shared with the Omega had other plans. And far beyond the ridge, eyes watched from the shadows. The Alpha would not rest. The pack would not forgive. And a curse, long dormant in Kale's bloodline, had begun to awaken. Lyra pressed closer to him, her hand trembling on his small shoulder. "We'll face it together," she whispered. And in the silence of the forest, the wind seemed to answer. whistling through the trees, carrying a warning that even the brave could not ignore. The pup they buried alive was no longer helpless, and the forest would not let the darkness go unchallenged. The forest was alive with whispers that only Cale could sense. Each rustle of leaves, each ripple of the wind seemed to carry a message meant solely for him. Though his eyes could not see, his mind began to understand patterns, shapes, and presences. The world had changed, and he was changing too. Lyra watched him cautiously. Since the night of the storm, Cale had been different. The glow in his eyes was faint but unmistakable, like embers of a fire waiting to blaze. Sometimes he would sit silently, tilting his head, listening to sounds that she could not hear. Other times he would shiver as visions flickered behind his closed eyes. Visions of the forest, of the pack, and of shadows she could not explain. "I don't understand," she whispered one evening as they rested in their hidden hollow. "You see things I cannot, you feel things I cannot." "Cale, what are you?" Cale pressed against her hand as if to say he did not know either. Yet the forest seemed to respond to him. A subtle shift of wind, the sway of branches, the quiet tremor of the earth. Lyra realized that the pup she had saved was no longer just a helpless creature. He was something more, something extraordinary. Days passed in a tense rhythm. Lyra taught Cale to trust his other senses, to follow the whispers of the wind and the rustle of leaves. She brought him food, cleaned his fur, and sang softly to him at night. Her voice became a lullaby that connected them, a fragile shield against the dangers waiting beyond the hollow. But the pack's shadow grew longer. The Alpha, enraged by Cale's survival, had begun to gather forces. He was not a cruel leader without reason. He believed in strength above all else, and weakness challenged his authority. Rumors had reached him that the Omega had defied him, that she had brought the pup back to life. Such defiance could not be tolerated. One evening as the sun sank behind the horizon, Lyra sensed movement beyond the hollow. She froze, ears straining, heart pounding. Cale stirred beside her, sensing her fear. His small body shivered, but he did not run. "They're coming," Lyra whispered. "The Alpha. He knows we're here." Cale tilted his head, ears alert. Though he could not see, he felt the Alpha's presence, a cold, sharp force that cut through the forest like a knife. He growled softly, a warning that made Lyra's heart ache with pride and worry. They could not outrun the Alpha for long. The forest, though vast, had paths and clearings that could lead them into traps. Lyra knew they needed a plan. She had taught Cale to hide, to move silently, but the Alpha was cunning. He would not stop until he reclaimed what he believed was his property, the pup he had condemned. Night fell, thick and heavy. Stars pierced the sky like distant lanterns, but the forest below was a dark maze of twisted trees and tangled roots. Lyra held Cale close as they moved, every step measured, every sound noted. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the trees, low, commanding, and filled with anger. "Lyra!" The Omega froze. The voice was unmistakable, the Alpha. His presence pressed against them, invisible but suffocating. Cale whimpered softly, his body tensing. Lyra's mind raced. There was no way to fight him head-on. Not yet. "Come out!" the Alpha called, his voice carrying through the forest like thunder. "You cannot hide what belongs to me!" Lyra tightened her grip on Cale. She would not let him go. Not to the pack that had tried to bury him alive. Not to the Alpha who believed cruelty was law. Cale, though small, stepped forward, ears lifted, sensing the Alpha's power. The visions had grown stronger in the past weeks. Images of the Alpha, of past pack members who had been wronged, and of something darker, something ancient that whispered of justice and reckoning. Lyra saw the change in him. Though he had been blind, he now seemed aware of every motion, every intention around them. And though his body was still that of a pup, his presence carried a weight that made even her tremble. "You are strong," Lyra said softly, almost to herself. "Stronger than I imagined." Cale growled in response, low and resonant, a sound that seemed too deep for one so young. It was a warning, not just to the alpha, but to the forest itself. The leaves rustled as if acknowledging his power, the wind carrying whispers she could not understand. The alpha's growl came closer, sharp and cold. "Kale," he said, his tone filled with both anger and disbelief. "You dare defy me? You are mine. I buried you for a reason. You are weak, and yet you survive." Kale's head lifted, ears swiveling, sensing the alpha without sight. The visions had taught him more than he could express. He could feel the alpha's fear beneath the anger, the doubt beneath the confidence. And though he was small, he felt the pulse of something ancient within him, a force that had lain dormant until now. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Shadows deepened, and the trees swayed in silent anticipation. Lyra pressed closer to Kale, feeling the tension radiating from him. "We will not let him take you," she whispered. Kale pressed his head against her shoulder, a gesture of trust and understanding. He could not see the alpha, but he could feel him. And in that feeling he understood the danger, the stakes, and the choice before him. Suddenly the alpha emerged from the shadows, his massive frame looming over them. The moonlight caught the glint of his eyes, sharp and unyielding. He stopped a few paces away, his gaze fixed on Kale. "You survive," the alpha said again, his voice low and dangerous. "Why?" Lyra's hand shook as she held Kale. "Because he is not weak," she said firmly. "He is alive. That is enough." The alpha laughed, a sound that echoed through the forest like breaking ice. "Alive? That is not enough. You defy me, Omega. You betray your pack. You risk everything for this pup?" Kale's small body trembled, but something inside him rose, a courage that had been hidden by fear, a defiance that had grown in secret. The visions came again, sharper this time. The alpha's fall, the pack's hidden truths, and the power within Kale that demanded recognition. He growled, louder this time, and the forest seemed to answer. Leaves rustled, branches shifted, and the shadows moved with a life of their own. Lyra gasped. She had never seen Kale so commanding, so alive. The alpha's eyes narrowed. He stepped forward, claws digging into the earth. "Do you think you can challenge me?" he demanded. "Do you dare defy the laws of the pack?" Kale's growl deepened, resonant and full of an unspoken warning. Lyra pressed her hand against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. "You are not alone," she whispered. "We face this together." The alpha paused, sensing the bond between them. Something in Kale's presence, and Lyra's unwavering loyalty, made him hesitate. For a moment the forest was still, as if holding its breath. And then the vision surged again. Kale saw glimpses of the alpha's weakness, the cracks in his control, the fear beneath his dominance. He understood now that he was more than a pup. He was a force that could challenge the pack, reshape the forest, and protect those he loved. The alpha growled, frustrated and furious. "You will not survive this," he hissed, stepping closer. Kale bristled, body shaking with energy he did not fully understand. And then, without warning, he lifted his head and howled, a sound that echoed through the trees, filled with power, defiance, and something ancient. The howl struck the alpha like a blade. He stumbled back, ears flat, eyes wide with shock. The forest around them seemed to respond. The wind carried the howl. The trees quivered, and the shadows deepened. Lyra clutched Kale, tears in her eyes. You did it," she whispered. "You are not what they said you were." Kale pressed against her, exhausted but unbroken. Though his body was still that of a pup, he had tasted power, tasted courage, and tasted the strength that came from trust and loyalty. The alpha, recovering his composure, glared at them both. "This is not over," he warned, his voice low and dangerous. "You may survive tonight, but the pack will not forgive. And the curse in your blood, it will not go unnoticed." Kale whimpered softly, but he did not cower. Lyra hugged him tightly, feeling both fear and pride. The night was far from over, and danger still lingered. But for the first time, Cale understood that he was not helpless. He was not weak, and with Lyra by his side, he might just survive what was to come. As the Alpha disappeared into the shadows, the forest seemed to exhale. The moonlight painted the hollow in silver, and Cale's small body glowed faintly with the power awakening inside him. Lyra held him close, whispering, "We will face the pack, together, and we will survive." And somewhere deep within the forest, eyes watched, waiting for the right moment. The Alpha would return. The pack would rise, and Cale's power, his curse, would demand a reckoning that none could ignore. The forest was no longer just a refuge. It had become a crucible. Every shadow seemed to hide both danger and secret lessons. Lyra led Cale deeper into the heart of the cursed woods, where the trees grew twisted and the air shimmered with something ancient. Here, they could hide from the Alpha and his pack, but the forest tested them in ways neither had anticipated. Cale walked beside her, small but determined, his paws silent against the mossy ground. Though blind, he sensed the rhythm of the forest, the heartbeat of every living thing around them. His ears twitched at the faintest whispers, the brush of wings, the rustle of leaves, the low growl of creatures that had watched them from the shadows. The visions continued, more vivid now, showing him flashes of danger and paths he could not see. Glenula glanced at him, worry in her eyes. "You're changing," she said softly. "Faster than I expected." Cale leaned into her hand, pressing his head against her palm. Though he could not speak, he understood her words. He felt the pull of something deep within him, a power tied to the blood that had once been deemed worthless. That power was awakening, and with it came responsibility and fear. As night fell, they settled near a small waterfall, the sound of falling water masking any movements from the shadows. Lyra set down their meager rations, her body tired from the constant vigilance. She had gone days without proper rest or food, yet her focus never wavered. Cale, sensing her fatigue, nuzzled her hand, a silent promise that she was not alone. "You have to rest," she whispered, brushing dirt from his fur. "You cannot protect me if I fall first." Cale tilted his head as if to promise he would, though he knew they were both vulnerable. The curse within him pulsed faintly, a reminder that their safety depended on more than hiding. It depended on strength, courage, and trust. Their quiet moment was shattered by a sudden rustle in the bushes. Lyra froze, holding Cale close. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike any they had seen, a guardian of the forest, its eyes glowing softly, fur shimmering with ethereal light. The guardian's presence was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Cale whimpered softly, but did not retreat. He felt the guardian's intent, a mixture of challenge and curiosity. The visions within him flared, showing images of past guardians and trials faced by those who dared enter this part of the forest. He understood instinctively that they were being tested. The guardian circled them, muscles coiled like springs, eyes locked on Cale. Lyra stepped forward, hand raised in a gesture of peace. "We mean no harm," she said. "We only seek shelter," the guardian growled, a low sound that vibrated through the earth. It lunged, but Cale did not move. Instead, he raised his small head and let out a howl, resonant and clear, carrying through the trees. The guardian froze, tilting its head, sensing the power within him. Slowly it stepped back, then sat, acknowledging their presence. Lyra exhaled, relief washing over her. "You did it," she whispered, placing a gentle hand on Cale's head. "You faced it, and it recognized you." Cale pressed against her, exhausted but emboldened. He felt the first stirrings of confidence, a feeling he had never known in the pack. The forest had accepted him, or at least, it had recognized that he was no ordinary pup. The night was long, but they slept in uneasy peace. When dawn broke, the forest was alive with light and shadow. Lyra stirred, roused by Kale's restlessness. His body trembled slightly, ears swiveling as visions flared before him. The Alpha gathering his forces, whispers of betrayal within the pack, and something darker, an ancient curse tied to Kale's bloodline. "They're coming," Lyra said, her voice tense. "The pack won't let this go." Kale pressed close to her, sensing the danger. He did not need to see. The forest, the wind, even the vibrations of the earth warned him. The visions told him more. The pack's weaknesses, the Alpha's anger, and the truth of their lineage, a secret that could change everything. They moved cautiously, taking hidden paths through the forest. The further they went, the stranger the forest became. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, and the air carried whispers in languages neither had heard. The trees themselves seemed alive, bending to test their resolve, questioning their intentions. "You must focus," Lyra said. "The forest will not guide us blindly. You have power now, but power without control can destroy us both." Kale listened, absorbing her words. The visions had given him glimpses of strength, but her guidance taught him discipline. Every step, every breath became a lesson in balance, between fear and courage, between instinct and understanding, between the darkness in his blood and the light of Lyra's unwavering loyalty. Days passed in this delicate rhythm. Lyra and Kale hunted small prey, drank from hidden streams, and rested only when they were certain the pack had not found them. Their bond deepened with each passing moment, not just for survival but for the comfort and trust they provided each other. Lyra saw something in Kale that no one else had: the resilience of spirit, the courage to face cruelty and rise above it. Kale, in turn, felt a connection he had never known, the warmth of protection, the guidance of a soul who valued him not for strength alone, but for his heart. But the forest, as beautiful as it was, held dangers beyond even their understanding. One evening they came to a clearing where a black mist rose from the ground, curling like living smoke. The mist whispered, voices layered and overlapping, revealing secrets of the pack, hidden truths of the Alpha, and shadows of Kale's own past. Kale stepped forward, ears twitching. The visions flared violently, images of pain and suffering colliding with glimpses of power and justice. Lyra grabbed his paw, grounding him. "You are not alone," she reminded him. "Do not let it overwhelm you," Kale growled softly, focusing on her hand, on her voice, on the bond they shared. Slowly the mist receded, as if acknowledging his control over it. For the first time, Kale realized the depth of his own power and the responsibility it carried. Their relief was short-lived. The Alpha's growl echoed in the distance, closer than they had hoped. Lyra's heart pounded. "He's found us," she whispered. "We must be ready." Colleen pressed against her, bracing himself. He could sense the Alpha's fury, smell the fear and tension radiating from the approaching pack members. But he was no longer the helpless pup buried alive. He was stronger, guided by the forest, by Lyra, and by the awakening power within him. When the pack emerged from the shadows, the tension was electric. Alpha's eyes burned with rage, and the pack circled, claws scraping against the forest floor. Yet Kale did not cower. He lifted his head, ears swiveling, and let out a howl that carried through the trees like a promise of defiance. The forest responded. The shadows deepened, and the ground vibrated beneath their feet. Kale's small body radiated a light faint but undeniable, a reflection of the power he had begun to understand. The pack faltered, sensing that this pup was unlike any they had encountered. Lyra's chest heaved as she watched him. "You can do this," she whispered, her hand pressed against his fur. "We face them together, always." The Alpha snarled, stepping forward, claws extended. "You are mine," he demanded. "I will reclaim what I buried. You will not defy the laws of the pack." Kale growled, stronger now, a sound that carried authority beyond his years. He stepped forward, pressing close to Lyra, ready to defend her as fiercely as she had defended him. The bond between them had transformed their fear into courage, their desperation into determination. The Alpha paused, sensing the bond and the power that emanated from Kale. For a moment the forest held its breath. Even the shadows seemed to lean in, waiting to see which force would prevail. Kale's howl split the night, a call to the forest, a challenge to the alpha, and a declaration that he would no longer be a victim. The pack faltered, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. Lyra pressed her hand against him, feeling the warmth, the strength, and the love that had grown between them. The alpha's roar of frustration echoed through the trees. "This is not over," he spat, retreating into the shadows with the pack. "You may have survived today, but your defiance will not be tolerated forever. The curse in your blood will not be ignored." Kale pressed against Lyra, trembling from the intensity of the moment, yet filled with a newfound confidence. The forest seemed to hum around them, acknowledging their victory, brief though it was. They had faced the pack, faced the alpha, and survived. Lyra hugged him tightly, whispering, "We will face whatever comes next together." Kale nuzzled her shoulder, his small body warm with the power and courage that had grown within him. Though the danger was far from over, and the pack would not rest, they had discovered something more valuable than safety. They had discovered each other. The forest sighed around them, leaves whispering, water singing, and shadows stretching. Somewhere deep within, the pulse of an ancient force stirred, acknowledging the awakening of Kale's power. And as they settled for the night, Lyra and Kale knew that the challenges ahead would be greater than ever. But so would their bond. The darkness that had once threatened to bury them was now tempered by courage, trust, and the beginnings of love. And in the heart of the cursed forest, the Omega and the pup, once weak, now strong, prepared for the trials yet to come. The forest was still, the kind of stillness that pressed against the skin and made every heartbeat echo. Lyra stood at the edge of the clearing, Kale close to her side, his small body tense yet poised. The alpha was coming, and this time there would be no hiding. The pack would not rest until the pup who had defied them was either destroyed or broken. Kale's ears twitched as he sensed the approach. Though blind, he felt the vibrations in the earth, the subtle currents in the wind, and the restless energy of the pack pressing forward. He pressed against Lyra's side, drawing courage from her warmth and steadiness. "You are ready," Lyra whispered, brushing a strand of hair from his fur. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Kale tilted his head, pressing against her hand, and a faint glow flickered in his eyes. The curse in his bloodline, long dormant and awakened by the trials of the forest, pulsed with quiet intensity. It was not a curse of destruction. It was a test, a force that demanded courage, compassion, and restraint. And Kale had learned to channel it. The first shadow emerged from the trees, followed by another and another, until the alpha and his pack surrounded them in the clearing. The ground trembled under their paws, a silent warning of the confrontation to come. The alpha's eyes, sharp and burning, fixed on Kale. Rage, disbelief, and something like fear flickered in his gaze. "You survive," the alpha growled, claws digging into the soil. "But you will not survive this." "You will bow, pup, or you will fall." Kale stood taller, though he was still small, and let out a howl that carried across the clearing. The sound was not just a warning, it was a statement of defiance, of growth, and of something far older than any pack law. The wind responded, rustling the leaves in harmony with his call. Lyra moved to his side, placing her hand on his shoulder. "You are not alone," she whispered. "Your strength is ours together." The alpha snarled and lunged, a blur of claws and teeth. Kale braced himself, the visions in his mind guiding him. He dodged, sidestepped, and for the first time he acted not as a blind pup, but as a force shaped by trust, courage, and the awakening power in his blood. The pack tried to surround them, but the forest itself seemed to respond. Roots shifted beneath their paws, branches leaned to block paths, and shadows thickened around Kale, giving him space to move and strike with precision. It was not just his power, it was the bond between him and Lyra, and the forest recognizing his right to exist. The alpha paused, taken aback by the coordination and resilience of the two. What is this?" he hissed, eyes narrowing. "You are nothing, a pup." "And yet," Kale let out another howl, and the forest answered. The ground trembled, the shadows deepened, and the very air seemed alive. For a moment the Alpha faltered, sensing the ancient force that Kale had begun to command. "You cannot win," the Alpha growled, voice low and dangerous. "I am the Alpha. You will submit." Kale's ears twitched. He could feel the fear beneath the Alpha's dominance, the cracks in his authority. And he understood now that true strength was not just about power. It was about courage, compassion, and the choices made in the face of fear. He stepped forward, pressing close to Lyra. The light in his eyes flared, brighter now, casting long shadows across the clearing. The pack hesitated, feeling the change, sensing that the pup they had tried to bury was no longer helpless. The Alpha roared in frustration, lunging again, but Kale sidestepped and let the power within him ripple through the clearing. It was not a destructive force. It was a shield, a presence that made the pack pause and rethink. Lyra moved alongside him, her calm and courage amplifying the strength that radiated from Kale. For the first time, the Alpha realized that victory was not in raw strength alone. Kale, small though he was, had grown into a force that balanced power with empathy, courage with restraint. The pack had underestimated what it meant to survive and to fight for what was right. Kale's howl split the air again, and the Alpha stumbled back, eyes wide. The shadows deepened, wrapping around Kale and Lyra, protecting them and making the forest itself an ally. The pack hesitated. Even their loyalty wavered in the presence of something greater than fear and dominance. The Alpha growled, furious, but his movements were no longer fluid. They were hesitant, uncertain. Kale tilted his head, feeling the rhythm of the Alpha's pulse, sensing the doubt and the cracks in his command. He could end this now, take vengeance for what the Alpha had tried to do, but Lyra pressed against him, a reminder that true strength lay not in destruction, but in justice and restraint. Kale lowered his head, and the glow in his eyes softened. The forest responded in kind, the shadows retreating slightly, and the wind carrying whispers of approval. The Alpha paused, confusion and awe flickering across his features. You are more than I imagined," the Alpha muttered, voice low. "A curse, or a gift, I do not understand." Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. "He is no curse," she said. "He is proof that strength is not measured by fear, cruelty, or dominance. It is measured by courage, compassion, and loyalty. You buried him because you feared weakness, but he is stronger than you because he fights for life, not for control." The Alpha's growl faltered. The pack murmured among themselves, realizing that the power they had feared was not just Kale's, but the bond he shared with the Omega, who had risked everything to save him. Kale pressed against Lyra's hand, drawing courage from her calm. "We will not destroy you," Lyra whispered. "But we will stand for what is right." The Alpha's posture slackened slightly, the realization settling in that dominance alone was no longer enough. Kale's presence, his courage, and the forest's subtle support had shifted the balance. The pack's anger remained, but the fear of the unknown and the respect for the pup's strength created hesitation. Kale's glow softened completely now, no longer a warning, but a sign of harmony. He pressed his head against Lyra's shoulder, exhausted but resolute. The forest seemed to sigh around them, acknowledging the balance restored, not through destruction, but through courage, loyalty, and the choices made in the face of cruelty. The Alpha stepped back fully, eyes still sharp but now tempered with understanding. "This is not over," he said slowly, voice low. "But you have changed something in this forest, and perhaps in me." The pack followed him silently, leaving Kale and Lyra alone in the clearing. The moon bathed them in silver, and the wind carried whispers of approval through the trees. For the first time, the forest felt safe, even if only temporarily. Lyra held Kale close, feeling the tremble of exhaustion in his small body. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it." Kale pressed his head against her chest, sensing the warmth, the safety, and the bond they shared. He had faced cruelty, fear, and the shadows of the past, and emerged not broken but stronger, tempered by the trust and loyalty of someone who had never given up on him. Days passed as they rested, recovering in the heart of the forest. Kale's powers became more controlled, more precise. He could sense danger before it arrived, feel the pulse of life around him, and communicate with the whispers of the forest. Lyra guided him, teaching patience, restraint, and empathy. The curse that had once threatened to define him now became a gift, tempered by love and courage. The pack did not forget, but their fear and respect grew. Some whispered of Kale as a legend, the pup who had survived death and defied the Alpha. Others watched cautiously, unsure if they could ever challenge his presence. The balance of power had shifted, but it was tempered by justice, not cruelty. Kale and Lyra became inseparable, a team forged in adversity. The forest became their home, their sanctuary, and their training ground. Every day brought lessons in courage, in compassion, and in the strength that comes from facing darkness together. And though the Alpha lingered in the edges of their lives, the forest, Kale's courage, and Lyra's loyalty created a balance that none could break easily. The pup who had been buried alive now stood tall, not as a threat to the pack, but as a symbol of what could be achieved through love, courage, and unwavering trust. Lyra stroked Kale's fur as they watched the sun rise over the forest. "We've changed more than the pack," she whispered. "We've changed ourselves. And the future, it's ours to face together." Kale pressed his head against her hand, eyes closed but glowing faintly with the harmony he had found. He no longer feared the world, no longer doubted his worth. The forest, the pack, and even the Alpha had witnessed his transformation. Together, Omega and Pup, once weak, once abandoned, stood as guardians of the forest, symbols of courage, trust, and the power of love forged in adversity. And far beyond the forest the wind carried a promise. The darkness may always return, but so will courage, compassion, and the bonds that can withstand it. The pack had buried him alive. The world had doubted him. Yet Kale, guided by Lyra, had risen, not broken, not bitter, but transformed. And in the heart of the cursed forest a new era had begun.